In recent days, much has been said in Ukraine about the problems of the Ukrainian army in the Pokrovsk direction, and Russian dictator Putin even declared that Ukrainian units in Pokrovsk are surrounded. However, observer Alexander Kovalenko explained that while the situation in Pokrovsk remains grave, it's far from catastrophic. He noted that the Russian army has been unsuccessfully attempting to capture the city for almost a year, even though the Kremlin had set such a goal by the end of 2024. The 51st Division suffered a particularly resounding failure, running out of steam near Dobropollia and unable to develop an offensive in Chasovoy Yar and Toretsk. Now the main attack is being carried by the Russian Second Army, which is employing a new tactic. Sabotage groups of 2 to 4 people disguised as civilians. They infiltrate Pokrovsk in small waves, attempting to gain a foothold on the outskirts. Currently, Russian troops have 2 infiltration routes, the analyst says. The first is through Leontovichi and the private sector of Durnyak, with access to the train station and the Stroymetal plant. The second is through Zelenovka and the Lazurny and Yuzhny districts, where they have managed to temporarily gain a foothold on Yubileynaya Street and near the Rosinka kindergarten. However, most of these areas remain mere penetration zones, not full control zones. In the city center, Russians are occupying schools and hospitals, turning them into shelters. But attempts to break through further have failed, especially in eastern Pokrovsk, where Ukrainian forces are confidently holding their ground. Recently, a small group of Russian saboteurs attempted to break through the northern part of the city, but were destroyed. This failed attempt only sparked another wave of panic and rumors of an imminent encirclement, which, in fact, never happened. Kovalenko concluded the situation is grave but manageable. Russian troops are suffering losses, and their successes are limited to chaotic infiltrations. If the Ukrainian army continues to act calmly and systematically, Pokrovsk could become a living hell for the enemy. The main thing is not to panic and not to spread rumors, which Russian propaganda so loves to feed on. At the same time, the Ukrainian armed forces commented on Putin's statements about the encirclement of Pokrovsk and Kupiansk. Ukrainian military officials have refuted Vladimir Putin's latest false claims about the alleged encirclement of Ukrainian troops near Kupiansk and Pokrovsk. According to the defense forces, the Russian dictator is once again attempting to confuse wishful thinking with reality in order to demonstrate some success for his army amid the massive losses at the front. The Joint Forces Group noted that fierce fighting continues near Kupiansk, as well as in certain areas of the city, but it is inappropriate to speak of encirclement. Russian units are attempting to gain a foothold in the northern part of the city, but are suffering significant losses. Ukrainian defenders are in control of the situation and are effectively holding off the enemy. Claims of encirclement are fiction and fantasy, having nothing to do with the reality on the ground, the Ukrainian command emphasized. Ukrainian Interior Minister Ihor Klimenko also refuted Putin's statements. He stated that the General Staff is aware of the true state of affairs and emphasized that the situation in the Kupiansk area is under control. We have many units there, and they're operating in a coordinated and confident manner. I believe the situation has stabilized today, Klimenko said at a briefing in Kiev. Putin previously claimed that Russian troops had allegedly encircled Ukrainian units in the Pokrovsk and Kupiansk areas and even offered to allow journalists to verify his claims. However, this move appears to be intended solely for a domestic audience.
The Group of Friends for Peace on the Ukraine Crisis addressed the press on Wednesday at the United Nations. According to Associated Press Ambassador Sergio Francadonesi of Brazil told reporters, this group was among the first to call for an immediate and complete ceasefire, a call we firmly reiterate today. Ambassador Fu Zong of China added, "We call for increased humanitarian assistance and the strengthening of the protection of civilians, in particular women, children and the humanitarian personnel."
Our group has consistently called for an early peaceful settlement of the conflict, remained dedicated to fostering dialogue and engagement, and actively engaged with relevant parties with a view to promoting common ground across the international community. All our efforts have been guided by our strong commitment to the purposes and principles of the UN Charter, including respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of any state and the peaceful settlement of disputes. We remain committed to promoting the spirit of solidarity and partnership between nations, as emphasized by the Bandung principles inter alia. Deeply troubled by the prolonged hostilities and the immense negative impacts, this group was among the first to call for an immediate and complete ceasefire, a call we firmly reiterate today. We underscore the need to observe principles for de-escalation and the importance of non-expansion of the battlefield and non-intensification of fighting. We believe that avoiding actions that could further fuel the conflict, including the proliferation of weapons and other means of war into the parties of the conflict, would help pave the way toward a ceasefire and political settlement.
We reaffirm that only a negotiated political solution, including through inclusive diplomacy and the political means based on the UN Charter, can bring this conflict to an end. The shared goal must be to find a comprehensive, just, and a lasting solution, one that addresses mutual concerns of the parties to the conflict and that leads to a peace agreement, negotiated directly by and acceptable to them. Our group stands ready to support the next steps agreed by the relevant parties to the conflict, including their possible discussion on the roadmap. We believe that the UN has a role to play in fostering the diplomatic efforts and in the implementation of any peace agreement. We call for increased humanitarian assistance and the strengthening of the protection of civilians, in particular women, children, and the humanitarian personnel. All parties are obligated to strictly comply with international humanitarian law and to comply with international humanitarian law. Civilian infrastructure and objects, including nuclear facilities and other installations containing dangerous forces, must never be the target of military operations. We stress that all parties are bound by the principles of distinction, proportionality, and precaution in the conduct of hostilities. We also emphasize the obligation of the humane treatment of prisoners and encourage and support initiatives to facilitate the safe exchange of prisoners of war as a confidence-building measure that alleviates human suffering.